I just have two criteria. The team, like I just said, needs to have the long-term in mind and will not play Trey Lance as a rookie. And I know teams say that a lot. We're going to sit this guy. We have our veteran. We have our stopgap. Then they start 1-4 and they force the young guy in there. As long as the team will not do that, then I think that is completely fine. That will be a good fit. And get Trey Lance into a system that is preferably off the Shanahan or Kubiak tree. Yes, that includes your Vikings with new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. That will get him outside the pocket, will let him throw on the run so he can threaten defenses outside the pocket, because we know he's not great inside the pocket right now. I don't think he's terrible winning from in the pocket, but you want him to use his athleticism. And kind of the last sub criteria, I'll say, use Trey Lance in the designed run game. I don't know if he's like Zach Wilson or Deshaun Watson when it comes to just being a natural playmaker with his legs. And yes, he was playing at the FCS level, but there was a lot of quarterback power run in that North Dakota State offense. And he was not only sinking his hips and jump cutting away from linebackers, but he was like running through tackles. And then, as you mentioned, accelerating down the field. So as long as a team will have the long-term in mind and not play him in 2021, or maybe he gets a game or two at the end of the season, get him out on play action bootlegs and use him in the designed run game. Any of those teams, if you're a fan of any team that can fit most of those criteria, hopefully the first two, then I'm fine with that fit for Trey Lance. And then conversely, a team that wants him to be stoic in the pocket, maybe an air raid system that's just going to ask him to attack down the field, keep him between the tackles. I wouldn't like that. And any desperate team or quasi-desperate team that wants to play him right away. And I think it kind of works out because those would be the teams picking near the top of the draft. And it seems as though at this point in late February that Trey Lance probably won't be, one of the top 5 selections. So a team that wants instant results should not pick Trey Lance and let him use his athleticism to really accentuate his talent once he gets to the NFL.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned his running game and making that a part of just what you do. I think that teams are naturally hesitant to do that because they think that they're putting their quarterback in a lot of danger. But I think we've seen from what the Buffalo Bills do with Josh Allen and with what Lamar Jackson has done in Baltimore that that's not necessarily the case. I mean, just because someone is running doesn't mean that they're going to fall apart and get injured. It really kind of depends on how good you are at it. I mean, Cam Newton, it wore on his body after a while, but he was a freight train and it was extremely effective, especially in the red zone. And that's what Trey Lance could bring. I think, remember last year they were talking about Jalen Hurts as somebody who could almost be a running back. He was so good at running. I think Trey Lance is even a little bit better than that because he's more powerful than that. And so I agree with you completely that putting him in a system where he can also run and get outside the pocket and use his arm to take those deep shots is really important. I look at, though, the situation for how long-term are you in your outlook? So it's kind of funny. I mean, this team might not sound like they're a team after a big move they just made that should take Trey Lance, but I think they are the Detroit Lions. They just traded. I get it. They just traded for Jared Goff. But that organization right now is down to its completely, bare bones. I mean, you have Jared Goff there, but he's going to play with a roster that's having 2 wide receivers likely to leave if they don't franchise tag Kenny Golladay. So you've got your receivers leaving. You've sort of built up an offensive line, but you've got the bones of that thing for a while. You drafted a running back, but I mean, was that really the right move for the time? And your defense is just empty at this point. You need years to build that up. So if you look at the way that Jared Goff's situation is laid out with this contract, you could draft Trey Lance, play Jared Goff for 1 or 2 years. I don't even think it's crazy to sit Trey Lance for 2 years and then be ready to hand the ball off to him. I mean, I'm generally a believer in sitting a guy for a year no matter what, but especially if it's someone as raw as him. So I think if you're the Detroit Lions at number 7, you should consider it. And that's if Philadelphia doesn't take him at 6. And Philadelphia is kind of like this, where they might look at it and say, anything else here is just unimportant compared to the quarterback. Why don't we draft Trey Lance and see how him and Jalen Hurts play it out? If Hurts is great next year, we trade Trey Lance for a first-round pick. And if he fails, if Jalen Hurts fails, then we hand the ball over to, Trey Lance eventually. So, I think that there's a lot of teams that are really interesting. And then there's Carolina sitting there and saying, come on, Teddy Bridgewater, play him for another season, rebuild, build up that roster, spend some money in free agency. So I think any part of that back half of the top 10, those teams are ripe to do it.